So, one of the ways that you can solve a quadratic equation, if it's written in a certain form, is by using what's called the square root property. Now, the square root property is basically taking the square roots of both sides of an equation. So you can do that, of course, because you can solve an equation by doing the same thing to both sides. So I have several equations here that I'm going to solve using the square root property. Now, this first one, I've got x squared equals 4. So I'm going to try to undo the square. I'm going to do that by taking a square root. Now, whenever I take the square root of x squared, I know that 2 would be a possible answer, right? Because when you square 2, you get 4. But 2 is not the only answer, because I could get negative 2 as well. When I square it, it also gives me 4. So whenever I take the square root of x squared, it's not just a positive number. It could be either positive or negative, that number. So my answer here would be positive or negative 2. When I come to this blue problem, I have two things going on, a square and a plus 3. And remember, we do reverse PEMDAS. The 3 is in a grouping symbol, so it has to be the last thing we undo. So we're going to undo the square by taking the square root. Square root of x plus 3 squared is x plus 3, as long as I remember to put a plus or minus on the other side. Square root of 16 is 4, because it's a perfect square. And then I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. And then I have two numbers here. I have negative 3 plus 4, which is 1, and then I have negative 3 minus 4, which is negative 7. So those two answers actually satisfy my original equation. So if we look at this green problem, again, two things to undo, but the square is the first thing we've got to do. X minus 5 squared, the square root of that is x minus 5, as long as I put a plus or minus on the other side. Square root of 7 doesn't simplify because 7 is a prime number. And then I'm going to move my 5 to the other side. So you get 5 plus or minus the square root of 7. And those are two different numbers. Square root of 7 is somewhere between 2 and 3. So should be good to go. 5 plus that would be something like 7 point something, and 5 minus that would be like 1 point something. So if I were looking for an exact answer, this is what I would give. If I were looking for an approximate answer, I'd give the decimals rounded to the hundreds. So if I look at this yellow problem, I want to undo in reverse PEMDAS order. So I want to undo the 7 first. So I get 2 times x minus 3 squared, but I subtract 7 from both sides. And then I want to undo the multiplication. Divide both sides by 2. And now I'm going to undo the square by taking the square root. Again, square root of x minus 3 squared is x minus 3, as long as I put a plus or minus on the other side. And then I got that square root of negative 3, which I would have to deal with by pulling out an I. And the square root of 3 doesn't simplify any further. And then I solve it, finish it, by getting the 3 to the other side. So this would be 3 plus or minus I root 3. That's two complex answers. So this is how we do solve a quadratic by using the square root property. We're going to chain that in with completing the square in the next video.